Imagine you've somehow travelled to a Roman banquet in the year 50 AD. The wine is flowing, the conversation is lively, and suddenly someone proposes a toast to the divine Julius Caesar. You raise your glass, but then pause. Wait a minute. Wasn't Julius Caesar a man who lived and died? He's a hero to the Romans, but how can they be toasting him as a literal god? Well, with deification, humans could become gods. Picture this. It's 44 BC. Julius Caesar, the famous Roman general and statesman, has just been assassinated on the steps of the Senate. His body lies cold on the marble floor. That's the end of Caesar, right? Wrong. Because in just 2 years, Caesar will rise again, not as a man, but as a god with temples, priests, and thousands of worshippers across the Roman world. But how did the Romans turn a man into a god? And perhaps more importantly, why? These aren't just questions of niche curiosity. They cut to the heart of how we view power, leadership, and the blurry line between the human and the divine. So in the next few minutes, we're going to unravel this practice of Roman deification, how a human could become a god in ancient Rome, and who got to decide this. Let's get to it. So, what exactly did it mean to get deified in ancient Rome? At its core, deification was the process of elevating a mere mortal to divine status, essentially turning a human into a god. It was a complex religious, political, and social process that had far-reaching implications. When someone was deified, they received the title divus, or diva, meaning the divine one. They would get their own temples, their own priests, and their own cult following. People would pray to them, make offerings to them, and believe that these newly minted gods could influence events on earth. But deification wasn't just a religious honor, it was a powerful political tool too. By deifying a deceased Roman, the current regime could legitimize their rule, strengthen dynastic claims, and even justify their policies. Let's look at how this played out with Julius Caesar. After Caesar's assassination, his great-nephew and adopted heir, Augustus, aka Octavian, pushed for Caesar's deification. If Caesar was a god and Octavian was his son, that would be a huge boost to his authority and right to rule. By emphasizing his connection to the divine Caesar, Octavian strengthened his position against political rivals like Mark Antony. By deifying Caesar, Octavian could then style himself as Divi Filius, son of a god. He could claim he was continuing the divine will of Caesar, using it to support his own political agenda. So with this move, Octavian set the stage for his own rise to power. He would go on to become Augustus, Rome's first emperor, ruling for 41 years and reshaping Roman government from a republic to an empire. Now you may be thinking, wait, isn't this kind of like becoming a saint in Christianity? And you'd be right to a degree. Both are typically granted after death, involve veneration from followers, and require a formal process of recognition by authorities. Both deified individuals and saints were seen as potential intermediaries between humans and the divine. But that's where the similarities end. First and foremost, deified Romans were considered actual literal gods, while saints in Christianity are emphatically not gods. This is a crucial distinction. Romans worshipped the deified as gods, complete with temples, priests, and sacrifices. Christians, on the other hand, venerate saints but do not worship them. That honor is reserved for God alone. The powers attributed to these figures also differ greatly. Deified Romans were thought to have godlike powers, able to influence events on earth directly. Saints in Christianity, on the other hand, are believed to be able to intercede with God on behalf of the living, but they don't have powers of their own. The motivations behind these practices also diverge significantly. Roman deification often had explicit political motivations used to legitimize rulers and dynasties. Sainthood, while it can have political implications, is primarily a religious recognition of an individual's holiness and closeness to God. Lastly, the exclusivity of these honors differs. Deification in Rome was rare and typically reserved for emperors and their family members. Sainthood, while still a rare honor, is potentially open to any Christian who lives an exceptionally holy life. So while both practices involve elevating certain individuals after death, they reflect very different religious and cultural worldviews. The Roman practice blurred the line between human and divine in a way that monotheistic religions never could. Let's dive a bit deeper into what deification looked like in ancient Rome. The process, known as apotheosis, typically began after the death of an emperor or a member of the imperial family. It wasn't automatic. Not every emperor was deified, and it was considered a special honor. While the concept of humans becoming divine wasn't entirely new to Romans, they had legends of figures like Romulus becoming gods. Julius Caesar was the first Roman to be officially deified through a formal political process. This happened in 42 BC, 2 years after his assassination. Interestingly, shortly after Caesar's death, a bright comet appeared in the sky for 7 days. Many Romans interpreted this as a sign of Caesar's ascension to the heavens, adding a cosmic stamp of approval to his deification. Talk about perfect timing. The process of deification was a complex affair, blending political maneuvering with religious ceremony. It usually began with a proposal made by the current emperor or an influential senator. The Senate would then debate the merits of the deification, considering the deceased's accomplishments and virtues. That doesn't mean the Senate or emperor had the power to actually create gods. Rather, the official stance was that they had the authority to recognize a person's ascension to godhood. Note the word recognize. The idea was that they were acknowledging a transformation that had already occurred rather than causing it themselves. If the emperor in question was believed to have become a god, the Senate would issue a decree officially recognizing this new god. But the process didn't stop there. A crucial part of this transformation from mortal to divine was the consecratio. The consecratio was a grand public spectacle, a final funeral of sorts that marked the deceased's passage into godhood. During this event, an eagle would be released, symbolizing the soul's ascent to the heavens. Following the consecratio, a cult and priesthood would be established for the new god. Temples would be built, rituals designed, and soon enough, Romans across the empire would be offering prayers and sacrifices to their newest divine patron. Not everyone would be impressed, though. One famous reaction comes from Seneca, who wrote a satirical piece called The Pumpkinification of Claudius. Instead of becoming a god, Seneca joked that the Emperor Claudius was given to Caligula to become a slave. This leads us to a crucial question. Did the Romans actually believe that these deified individuals lived on as gods? This is a relevant question, and the answer isn't straightforward. Roman beliefs about deification were complex and varied across time, social classes, and individuals. Many Romans, especially among the general population, did seem to accept the idea of deified emperors as genuine gods. They would pray to these new gods, make offerings at their temples, and participate in their festivals. For these Romans, the deified emperors were as real and powerful as Jupiter or Mars. However, we do have evidence of skepticism about humans becoming gods, especially among the educated elite. The Roman orator Cicero, writing before the practice of imperial deification began, expressed doubt about the deification of Romulus in his work De Republica. He suggested that belief in such transformations was more common in less educated times. While Cicero wasn't commenting on imperial deification, his skepticism shows that the idea of humans becoming gods was questioned by some Romans even before it became an imperial practice. Later, during the imperial period, we see more direct criticism, such as the previously mentioned satirical piece by Seneca, where he was mocking the deification of Emperor Claudius. This suggests that some Romans saw deification more as a political tool than a literal transformation. The level of belief also seems to have varied over time. In the early days of imperial deification, there may have been more genuine religious feeling attached to the practice, but as it became more routine in later years, it may have been seen by many as more of a political formality. It's also worth noting that Roman religion was arguably more focused on proper observance of rituals than on personal belief. So even Romans who were skeptical of deification might still participate in the cult of deified emperors as a matter of civic duty or political necessity. In the end, like many aspects of religion and politics, the Roman attitude towards deification was likely a spectrum, from true believers to skeptics, with many shades of belief in between. Now you might be wondering, when a Roman emperor became a god, did he become the god of something specific, like Mars was the god of war or Venus the goddess of love? Typically deified, Romans didn't become gods of specific domains in the way that traditional Roman gods did. They didn't usually get a divine portfolio such as war, love, or agriculture. Instead, they were usually worshipped more generally. Most deified emperors simply became known as divus, for example, Divus Augustus. They were gods, yes, but gods without a specific cosmic job description, so to speak. However, there were some interesting variations and exceptions to this rule. Some deified emperors became associated with particular virtues or concepts, often ones they embodied in life. Augustus, for instance, was sometimes associated with peace and prosperity, fitting for an emperor who ended a period of civil wars and ushered in the Pax Romana. In rare cases, deified individuals were given more specific associations. One fascinating example is Romulus, the legendary founder of Rome. When he was deified, he became associated with an existing god, Quirinus, who was linked to the Roman state and citizenship. Interestingly, the way deified emperors were worshipped could vary across the empire. In different provinces, they might be associated with local deities or given more specific roles based on regional preferences. This flexibility was part of what made the Roman imperial cult so adaptable and successful. There were also some truly exceptional cases. Take Antinous, for example. He wasn't an emperor, but he was the favorite of Emperor Hadrian. After Antinous drowned in the Nile, Hadrian had him deified and an entire city erected for him. Hadrian wanted Antinous to be associated with Hermes, but in other places he was associated with Dionysus, Silvanus, the Nile, or the concept of resurrection. It's also worth noting that as the empire progressed, some emperors started claiming divine status or association with particular gods, even while they were still alive. This was a shift from the earlier practice of deification only after death. So, while deified Romans didn't typically become gods of specific things, their divine status was flexible and could be adapted to different contexts and needs. So there you have it. The fascinating world of Roman deification, where humans could become gods through a mix of politics, belief, and spectacle. It's a practice that shaped one of history's most powerful empires and still gives us insights into the complex relationship between power, religion, and society. If you enjoyed this dive into ancient Roman practices, why not help us keep the historical explorations coming? Join our Patreon for exclusive content, including audio-only versions of our videos, perfect for listening on the go. Your support helps us continue bringing history to life. Thank you for watching.